It was the fastest piston-engine fighter America ever built, yet it never fired a single shot in the war it was designed for. The F8F Bearcat arrived at the very moment history was shifting, caught between two worlds, the twilight of propeller-driven fighters and the dawn of the jet age. On paper, it was everything a pilot could dream of: blistering speed, incredible climb, and the agility to outturn nearly any opponent. But when it finally rolled off the production line, the skies it was meant to dominate had already changed forever. The war in the Pacific was nearly over, and the Bearcat's battlefield debut was erased by the atomic bomb and Japan's sudden surrender. Yet this paradox only deepens the question: what if the Bearcat had arrived earlier? Could it have rewritten the air war? To answer that, we need to step back to the tense closing months of 1944. By late 1944, the Pacific War had entered its most desperate stage. Japan, though battered, refused to surrender. American carriers faced swarms of agile Mitsubishi Zeros and a terrifying new weapon: kamikaze pilots willing to turn their aircraft into flying bombs. Every carrier deck became a potential graveyard, and the U.S. Navy urgently needed a fighter that could climb faster, intercept quicker, and outmaneuver anything the enemy sent its way. The Hellcat had carried the Navy through the toughest years, scoring thousands of kills, but it was heavy and designed for endurance, not lightning reflexes. Grumman's engineers were handed a bold challenge: build something smaller, lighter and deadlier, an interceptor that could leap into the sky, shred a kamikaze before it reached the fleet, and return in time to do it again. It was a race against time, with the war's outcome hanging in the balance, and from this pressure cooker of urgency, Grumman's designers unveiled a radical creation: the F8F Bearcat, a machine born from desperation, yet destined to face an unexpected twist. On the surface, the Bearcat seemed unstoppable. It was faster than a Hellcat, more agile than a Corsair, and climbed like a homesick angel. But beneath its sleek frame lay critical weaknesses that made commanders uneasy. Its biggest flaw was range. The Bearcat carried far less fuel than its predecessor, which meant it could never escort bombers deep into enemy territory the way Hellcats or Corsairs could. For a war fought across vast oceans, this limitation was no small problem. There were also concerns about its specialization. The Bearcat was a pure dogfighter, optimized for speed and maneuverability, but lacked the versatility to carry heavy bombs or rockets. At a time when naval aviation demanded multi-role adaptability, this was both a strength and a curse. Engineers had crafted a weapon so sharp it cut only one way. The paradox was clear. The Navy had a masterpiece interceptor, but in a war where flexibility and reach decided victory, the Bearcat's brilliance looked strangely incomplete. And soon, those weaknesses would be exposed in the cruelest possible way. The Bearcat's arrival in 1945 was supposed to be dramatic, a game-changing weapon unleashed in the Pacific's final battles. But instead of roaring into combat, it stumbled onto the stage. Squadrons received their first aircraft just as the war's tempo was peaking, yet the pilots had little time to master the machine. Training accidents became common, with the Bearcat's raw power overwhelming inexperienced aviators. Its short range also clashed with Pacific realities. Carrier groups needed fighters that could stay airborne for hours, not minutes, and then came the cruel twist of timing. Even as the first Bearcat units prepared for deployment, history overtook them. The atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima, Japan surrendered, and the war was suddenly over. The fighter built to duel Zeros and cut down kamikazes never saw the battlefield. Instead of headlines celebrating its victories, the Bearcat became a what-if footnote, a thoroughbred with no race to run. But while its combat debut ended before it began, the story of its pilots revealed another layer of struggle. For the men who strapped into the Bearcat's cockpit, the experience was unforgettable. Pilots described the first takeoff as being launched from a slingshot. Its massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine hurled the lightweight frame into the sky with ferocity they had never felt before. It climbed like nothing else, one recalled, as if it wanted to leave the Earth behind. For veterans who had flown Hellcats and Corsairs, the Bearcat felt like liberation, a machine that finally matched their instincts in a dogfight. Yet with that exhilaration came frustration. These pilots had trained for war, hungered to test themselves against enemy aces, and now found their new mount had nowhere to fight. They drilled endlessly on carriers, rehearsing interceptions that would never come. Some admitted it was like being handed the keys to a race car, only to discover the track had already closed. The Bearcat inspired passion, but also a gnawing sense of being too late, an irony that shaped its post-war destiny. With World War II over, the Navy found itself in an awkward transition. Jet engines were arriving fast, promising speeds no piston fighter could ever match. On paper, that should have consigned the Bearcat to the scrap heap before it truly lived. But reality was more complicated. Jets of the late 1940s were temperamental, guzzled fuel, and were difficult to operate safely from carriers. The Navy still needed reliable piston fighters, and in that gap, the Bearcat found its second chance. Though it would never see combat in the Pacific, squadrons kept the Bearcat active through the late 1940s. It became a vital training tool, introducing young aviators to the ferocious power of high-performance fighters. And outside the Navy, the Bearcat found new life in a surprising arena, post-war air racing, where its blistering climb and agility made it a crowd favorite. The war it was built for had passed, but the Bearcat was not finished proving itself. Its true strengths were only beginning to emerge. Once freed from the shadow of war, the Bearcat's brilliance became undeniable. Pilots discovered that in pure dogfighting terms, it was perhaps the finest piston-engine fighter ever built. It could climb from sea level to 10,000 feet in under 2 minutes, an astonishing feat for its era. At top speed, it could push past 421 miles per hour, rivaling or beating anything still flying on propellers. Its short wingspan gave it incredible roll rates, allowing pilots to snap turn and outmaneuver opponents with startling ease. In air racing circuits, these qualities turned the Bearcat into a legend. Modified versions shattered records, leaving older Mustangs and Corsairs trailing in their wake. Even hardened Navy veterans admitted that if the Bearcat had reached combat in 1944, it would have chewed through Japanese aircraft with frightening efficiency. What had once seemed like flaws, its specialization, its raw aggression, were now seen as unmatched strengths. The Bearcat hadn't missed its chance entirely. It had simply found a different stage to showcase its brilliance. Though it never fought in the Pacific skies, the Bearcat carved out a different kind of legacy. In post-war air races, it stunned spectators, climbing almost vertically off the runway while rivals struggled to keep pace. Its modified variants dominated competitions at Reno and other circuits, setting speed records that stood for decades. Crowds cheered as the Bearcat performed aerobatics with the grace of a ballet dancer and the ferocity of a hunting falcon. Within the Navy, it left another mark. Young aviators who cut their teeth on the Bearcat often described it as the most exhilarating aircraft they ever flew, a machine that demanded skill but rewarded mastery. It became a symbol of raw potential, what piston technology could achieve at its absolute peak. In many ways, the Bearcat's true climax was not a battlefield victory, but a celebration of performance, engineering brilliance, and the enduring thrill of flight. Yet as jets took over the skies, its story was already shifting toward reflection. The F8F Bearcat stands today as both a triumph and a tragedy. It was the pinnacle of piston-engine design, a machine that represented the very best of Grumman's wartime engineering. Yet it arrived at the wrong moment, fated to be overshadowed by the jet age before it could ever prove itself in combat. That paradox has cemented the Bearcat as one of aviation history's great what-ifs. For historians, it embodies the fleeting nature of technological supremacy, how innovation can be rendered obsolete, not by failure, but by timing. For pilots, it remains a beloved mount, remembered not for combat kills, but for the sheer joy of flying it. And for the Navy, it was a stepping stone, bridging the era of propellers and the dawn of jets. Its story reminds us that greatness is not always measured by victory in battle, but by the enduring mark a machine leaves on those who flew it and those who still remember. The story of the F8F Bearcat is one of paradox, an apex predator built for a jungle that no longer existed. It was the fastest, most agile piston-engine fighter America ever created, yet it never faced the war it was meant to win. Arriving as the Pacific conflict closed and the jet age dawned, the Bearcat became a warrior without a battlefield. Its legacy written not in victories but in potential, and yet that potential has never been forgotten. To the pilots who flew it, the Bearcat was pure exhilaration, a machine that responded like an extension of the human body. To spectators at air shows and races, it was a spectacle of power, speed, and elegance. And to historians, it remains a symbol of history's cruel timing, where even brilliance can be outpaced by circumstance. So we are left with the lingering question, what if the Bearcat had been ready in 1943? Could it have reshaped the Pacific Air War, saved carriers from kamikazes, or altered the balance of aerial combat? We'll never truly know, but perhaps that's what makes the Bearcat unforgettable. Not just what it was, but what it might have been. So what do you think? Did the Bearcat miss its destiny, or did it still find greatness in another way?